Hi guys and welcome back to the Mighty Blues. My name is of course Cameron and welcome back today to another live stream. It is Thursday. I hope you all are doing well. Wow, what a 24 hours we have had as Evertonians. This football club just never fails to amaze us, does it? Just when you think, we might have a little bit of positive news this week, we sat down after the Aston Villa game and discussed the necessity to bring in a centre-forward and the necessity to make changes this week ahead of that important game against Wolverhampton Wanderers on Saturday. Just after we spoke about that, we heard reports that a deal to bring Che Adams to the football club was edging closer and closer and closer. And I thought on Sunday night, you know what? We might be in a position come Thursday, Friday this week where we have made a signing or two. We are looking stronger ahead of that game against Wolves, and we can look forward to, getting our first Premier League win of the season. But wow, was I wrong? Over the last 24 hours, we have heard that the move to bring MSP to the football club as investors has fallen through. It has collapsed. We're going to talk about that in today's live stream. We've also heard reports from Daniel Farke himself, or confirmed statements from Daniel Farke himself, stating that Wilfried Gnonto will be returning to training with Leeds United, and they have once again reiterated that he is not for sale. Everton have also been linked with Udinese striker BETO, alongside a number of other things that have happened over the last 24 hours or so that have just completely and utterly, re-emphasised the disgraceful position and situation that this football club is in. None of us needed reminding of how badly this football club is A, being ran at the moment, and B, has been ran for the last, well, I always use the term 4, 5, 6 years just because it's a general, frame of time, but realistically, it's 28 years, isn't it? Or 30 years, whatever it is, since who first entered the building. And, that has all been reiterised over the last 24 hours or so, the MSP stuff and the reasons behind where, the falling through of that deal, the stuff with Wilfried Gnonto and not being able to get, a deal done there. And whilst people might say, well, that's not the club's fault, that's got nothing to do with Everton, the reality of the situation is Everton have spent, 5, 6, 7 weeks now on, a move to bring a player to the football club, which ultimately hasn't materialised. And it's not like it hasn't materialised because Leeds United have changed their mind. It's not like it hasn't materialised because Leeds United have all of a sudden decided that they want more money. It's not materialised because Leeds United ultimately were not willing to sell him. But we knew that for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And while some people might say, yeah, Cam, but that happens in football where clubs say, we're not willing to sell this player, and then 2 weeks later they end up selling him. Whilst I understand and I appreciate that, Everton, whichever way you look at it, and whoever you blame for the failures at this football club, and whether or not you believe that the Gnonto situation was one that could be classed as a failure, whatever way you look at it, Everton Football Club simply are not in a position to be spending 8 weeks on bringing a footballer to the football club for them not to be brought into the football club. We simply cannot afford to do that. We've been rumoured bidding 15, 20, 25 million pound for Wilfried Gnonto, when we all know, the main problem with this football club and the biggest necessity in this transfer window is to bring in a striker. We've sat here for years and years and years and years and spoke about the need for Everton to bring in a centre-forward. The last 3 transfer windows, a centre-forward has been the primary target to bring in. And we've brought one centre-forward in 3 transfer windows, and he is a player that the manager himself deems as a slow burner and therefore is not ready to be integrated into the squad yet. It again is, an example of the systematic failures of this football club. And, it's no wonder that we turn up over a weekend and we watch Everton lose emphatically 4-0 to a good Aston Villa team. And people might look at that on the surface and go, well, listen, Everton have lost a game of football away from home to a good side. It's not that deep. But really, when you look at the reasons as to why we've lost that game, you could pin a lot of the blame on certain players, Michael Keane being one of them. You then look at the reasons Michael Keane is in this team. Well, okay, he's in this team because of the manager and the manager's inability to make a correct decision, and instead wanting to put his friends in there over the players that actually are best suited to Everton Football Club. And then you look beyond that. Well, why is Michael Keane still at the football club? Well, Michael Keane's still at the football club because Everton haven't been able to move him on because he's on silly wages. He was given a big contract. Well, why was he given a big contract? Because he was bought for stupid amounts of money by a fella that didn't have a clue what he was doing and barely stayed in the job for more than 6 months, 12 months. So, you know, what we are seeing on the pitch, I'm a firm believer, is you know, just the sort of drippings of what goes on at this football club. And whilst we sit here every week and talk about disgraceful performance after disgraceful performance and players not caring or players not being good enough or decisions not being good enough, it ultimately all is just a smaller example or a smaller sort of you know, bite-sized example of the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is the people at the top of this football club haven't got a clue what they're doing. Their decision making is terrible. Half of them, I'm convinced, don't even really care, including the owner himself. I'm convinced the owner himself doesn't actually give a shit, and that trickles down, you know, and ultimately bad businesses and badly run companies and badly run firms, they're not badly run from the bottom, you know, from the bottom upwards. You know, if you go into a I don't know, a local shop on the high street and the staff in there are rude and they don't really want to be there, and it's run terribly, and there's, you know, the clothes are everywhere and there's no organisation and the staff are, you know, where to be seen, there's a high likelihood that the top of that company is also failing and the people at the top of that company also aren't very good at their jobs. And that is exactly what is going on at Everton Football Club at the moment, and we've known this has been the case for years and years and years. And when that MSP news come out yesterday, there wasn't one part of me that was at the least surprised, and that wasn't because I knew it was happening, that wasn't because I knew before anybody else that the MSP stuff wasn't going to come of anything. It's just because every time there is a bit of negative news now surrounding Everton Football Club, it's just not surprising in the slightest, because nothing has changed. We marched last year, you know, before every home game and before away games and you know, at various different times throughout the year, you know, on weekends, international breaks, etc., for change. And we thought we were getting change this summer when the club announced that, you know, obviously Denise Barrett-Baxendale, Graham Sharp, Grant Ingles were leaving the football club. We thought, okay, maybe this is the start of something new. But one person remained. And it was arguable, and I said this at the time, that the one person that remained at the football club was the one that the majority of people wanted to see the back of. And I remember posing this question when the announcement was made about the board members, and I'm going to pose it again. Generally speaking, if I was to say to you when that announcement was made in April or May or whenever it was, I think it was May time, if I was to say to you now, would you have rather have seen the back of Bill Kenwright, but Denise Barrett-Baxendale, Grant Ingles and Graham Sharp were to stay, or would you have rather seen what happened and them three leave the football club, but Bill Kenwright ultimately stays on? Now, we can be given the sound bites of, oh, well, he's only staying in the interim to be a you know, somebody that is a middleman between the new, you know, investment and the owner, and he's only there as a transitional period. We can be given all of that bollocks all you like. The fact of the matter is we're in the 24th of August now. We're less than 2 weeks away from the transfer window shutting. In fact, we might even be less than a week away from the transfer window shutting now. A week today, I believe it is. And the fella's still here. And the fella still plays a prominent part in Everton's business, clearly he does, because if he doesn't, who is doing it? Who was the in the negotiations for the MSP situation? Well, was it Colin Chong? Well, highly doubt it, because he ultimately is the you know, a temporary CEO. He's somebody that knows himself that come the next 6 months, 12 months, he won't be in a job. So I doubt that it was given to him to negotiate. Was it you know, any of the other temporary members of the board? Well, I doubt it. So that means that it can only have been one, if not both, of these two people, the owner and the chairman. And we have all surmised over the last 27 years in the chairman's case, but certainly the last 4 or 5 years in the owner's case, that neither of them are good enough for Everton Football Club, and neither of them are capable of having any form of leadership role within this football club. The owner doesn't care, and he's shown that time and time again about this football club. Not only doesn't he care, he's absolutely useless, and he hasn't got a clue of how to run a football club. And the chairman is more interested in his own image and his own story than he actually is in making the decisions for Everton. And this has been a problem that has bitten us on the arse numerous times over the years. And the first thing I thought last night when I read the MSP news was, well, it's biting us on the arse again. And you know, if Everton don't sign a centre-forward within the next week, and people might say, well, Cam, don't be silly, because we will sign a centre-forward within the next week. Will we, though? Because we've been close to signing Che Adams for the last 10 days. After the Villa game, I sat here and done a video after the Villa game because we'd heard a report that Everton were closing in on the Che Adams deal. And I sat here and said, why didn't we get this deal done before Villa? Why are we getting it done after Villa? Well, we haven't even got that done. So clearly there's a problem there. Reports today from Sky Sports suggesting that Everton bid £12 million for Che Adams, and Southampton are now wanting £18 million for him. He's obviously had a fantastic start to the season. I think he scored 3 goals in 3 games for them. We were working on the Gnonto deal for 6 weeks, if not longer. Couldn't get that over the line. The deals we've done have been 2 comfortable loan deals, one of which was a clause in a contract for Jack Harrison's case, the other of which was Danjuma, who wanted to come to the football club, and there was obviously no problem with him leaving his current club. Another player has come in on a free transfer at 38 years old, and the only actual signing that we've made, it was Yusuf Chimiti. And the down payment was next to nothing, and Sporting were happy to let him go. And we're happy to let him go, clearly, because he isn't ready and he is a slow burner. So when it comes to actual business and actually improving this team and bringing players in that can improve this team, Everton have done very little of it. And I'm not saying that Jack Harrison and Danjuma don't improve the team, by the way, but I'm saying in terms of going out and signing a player for the next 4 or 5 years that can come in and make Everton better, we've not done that. And every time we've tried to do it, Gnonto, Che Adams, El Bilal Toure, for whatever reason, it's failed. Some people will say, well, it's not on the club that Bilal Toure wanted to go to Atalanta. Well, is it on the club that we spent 6 weeks pissing about with Gnonto when we knew full well Leeds weren't going to sell him and didn't want to sell him? Is it the club's fault that we're now unable to complete a move for Che Adams? Whichever way you look at it, I'm not really asked whose fault it is. I'm not asked if it's Sean Dyche's fault. I'm not asked if it's Kevin Thelwell's fault. I'm not asked if it's Bill Kenwright's fault. I'm not asked if it's John that sits next to me in the Park End's fault. What I'm asked about is if Everton haven't signed a striker by this time next week, we will be relegated. It is as simple as that. There is absolutely no ways about it. If Everton fail to sign, and when I say a striker, I don't mean Yusuf Chimiti, a 19-year-old kid who clearly isn't ready. I mean somebody that is going to come in and score, 7, 8 Premier League goals this season. And there's no guarantee that Che Adams could do that, by the way. But somebody that can come in and score 7, 8 goals this season in the Premier League for Everton. That, for me, is what's needed. Otherwise, Everton are going down. We've just spent 6 weeks on Willie Gnonto, who is a winger, a left winger that scored, 3 goals last season, something like that. Why didn't we say after 2 weeks, forget it? If you don't want to sell him, forget it. And we're gonna go and put that money on a centre forward that we know can come in and improve us and score goals. And I'm not saying Gnonto wouldn't have improved us, by the way. But what do we need more? A left winger or a centre forward? A centre forward, quite blatantly. It's a shambles. And people in the comments are right. It was always going to be a shambles because nothing has changed. Whilst this owner and this chairman is still at this football club, nothing will change. Because neither of them are fit for purpose. The chairman, as I said last week, is outdated and should have been moved on a decade ago. And the owner is clueless. And he's not only clueless, he's rash. And he's not only rash, he's careless. So we've got a clueless owner who doesn't care and makes rash decisions, and a chairman who's actually more interested in his own image than he is this football club. And these are the people that are running the football club. These are the people that are running the show. It's baffling to me. it's baffling to me how this continues. It really, really is, because I don't get where we go from here. I honestly, and again, this might just be because I'm being a bit negative, or because I'm a bit worried, or because, this last 24 hours has just been bad news after bad news after bad news. But I just don't get, I just don't see a world in which Bill Kenwright isn't associated with Everton Football Club anymore. I just don't see it. And obviously, there will come a day where that happens. Of course, they will. But there's been that much negativity, that much bad practice, that much, hiding, no leadership, no responsibility, no accountability, that it's just really, really hard to see, the wood from the trees, isn't it? It's really, really hard to see any positive. And the reality is, whether or not Bill Kenwright could turn around next Saturday and say, I'm out, and Moshiri could turn around next Saturday and say, right, I've sold this club to X person who's going to come in and they're going to put, brilliant board members on, and they're going to run the football club brilliantly. It's too late at that point. The transfer window is over, and we can sit here all we like and say, well, we've still got January, and we can still lash our hopes on Dominic Calvert-Lewin. If Everton haven't signed a striker by the end of this transfer window, we are going down. It's as simple as that. You can sugarcoat it how you like. You can try and convince yourself that Onana will score goals, or Decore will score goals, or whatever. Let's just face the facts. The facts are the facts. And it's worrying. It really, really is worrying. Let's get into the news anyway, because we've spoke for 15 minutes and we've not even spoken about the news. So obviously we read last night. I'm sure every one of you will have heard this anyway, but we'll go over it. Obviously, we seen last night that The Athletic reported that Everton's hopes of improving their financial situation have received a huge hit after MSP Sports Capital withdrew from talks about taking a minority stake at the club. Farhad Moshiri is trying to find alternative investment for Everton and has resumed talks with 777 partners. Alan Myers then reported earlier today a North American group and a company in Asia want to take stake in Everton and have presented financial packages to Farhad Moshiri to invest in Everton. They are hopeful their bid will be accepted in the next week. So that is where we are. I do just want to say, before we go any further into the sort of MSP stuff and the potential investments, I haven't spoken about this an awful lot on this channel. We've obviously heard of the MSP stuff for a number of months now. We've known that there was a potential investor coming in, whether it be MSP, whether it be 777, whether it be someone else, and I haven't spoken an awful lot about it, and there's a good reason for that, and that reason is I don't know an awful lot about this type of thing. For me, I'm an Evertonian. I'm a football fan. I want to go and watch Everton win games of football on a Saturday and Sunday. I don't really care who's giving us money and who's investing and where they get their money from, etc., etc. I just want to see Everton Football Club winning games. And for that reason, because I don't particularly know an awful lot about these types of situations, I don't really talk too much on them. Having said that, this clearly is a negative, because it was investment that the football club believed was coming in, which now isn't coming into the football club for whatever reason. Now, we're led to believe the reason is because MSP would have had to have bought a stake off of another company. Let me just try and find out the actual the actual reasons for their backing out, because like I said, for me it's all a little bit confusing at the moment surrounding this. So bear with me 2 seconds. So, Rights and Media Funding Limited demanded high tens of millions from MSP before a penny went into the football club. MSP walked away from exclusivity agreement with Everton after being told it would have to pay off an existing lender. Rights and Media Funding Limited demanded high tens of millions before a penny went to the football club. So they would have had to have paid off an existing lender before they were even able to before they were even able to invest in Everton Football Club. So I also want to highlight a comment that I've just got about Farhad Moshiri. You talk nonsense at times. The owner doesn't care. Of course he does. He's lost 500 million, so he cares about that. Has he, mate? Do me a favour and go and check what Farhad Moshiri's net worth was on the day that he bought Everton Football Club, and go and check it now. Because I'm pretty sure he has significantly increased his net worth in the time that he's had Everton Football Club. In fact, he may have even doubled, potentially even tripled his net worth in the time that he's had Everton Football Club. So that's a load of bollocks for a start. The manager plays his mates because he doesn't care about losing his job. Well, the manager's played Michael Keane more often than he hasn't played Michael Keane, despite the fact he knows, and we all know, Michael Keane isn't good enough. So I'm not saying Sean Dyche wants to lose his job, by the way. I'm just saying that the manager is picking players that aren't good enough to play for Everton for reasons that I simply cannot discuss because I don't know the answer to. Also, let's not forget that we can talk all we like about Moshiri spending a lot of money, and Everton have spent a lot of money in recent years. I'm not disputing that. But we've also sold Romelu Lukaku for £90-odd million, John Stones for £50-odd million, Richarlison for £60-odd million, Anthony Gordon for £40-odd million. We sold Moise Keane for £30-odd million. Adissa Gay went for £30-odd million. These are all players that were sold during Farhad Moshiri's time at Everton Football Club. And by the way, the money Farhad Moshiri has spent was Everton Football Club's money. If Farhad Moshiri walked away tomorrow, he wouldn't be the one in loads of debt. Everton Football Club are in loads of debt. Hence why MSP walked away, because they would have had to have paid off an existing lender before they were able to invest, and they didn't want to do that. If it was Farhad Moshiri's money all out of his pocket, then that wouldn't be the case, would it? That wouldn't be the case. So, yeah, as I said, I don't buy in personally to the whole Farhad Moshiri loves Everton. He spent loads of money. He probably has spent a fair whack of his own money, of course he has, because you've got to in modern day football. But he ain't spent it properly, has he? He ain't spent it properly, clearly, because look at where we are. So yeah, that is the situation with MSP. We've heard reports today that MSP will still be providing a sort of loan to Everton Football Club for the stadium at Bramley-Moore Dock. That was the original, I think, negotiation between MSP and Everton Football Club, was that they were going to provide investment for the new stadium, and then it became, that they may actually invest in the football club beyond that and become, take a minority stake in the football club beyond that. That obviously isn't happening anymore, but we're led to believe that the investment for the stadium is still on, or certainly is still set to be completed. So, yeah, like I said, I don't know an awful lot about these types of deals and these types of situations, and I've heard a couple of people talking about them today. I heard Simon Jordan this morning, who said it's not a great thing, but it's not the end of the world. I've heard a couple of other Blues saying that nothing has actually changed that much since 3 or 4 days ago. It's just that they won't be taking a stake now, whereas they were talking about potentially taking a stake. Whatever, whether something has changed or whether something hasn't changed, it is another example of this football club not being in the situation and the position that they should be in because of disgraceful mismanagement over the years, and that ultimately is where we are now. As the report suggests, Farhad Moshiri is trying to find alternative investments, 777 Partners being somebody that have also been linked with investing in Everton Football Club, and obviously Farhad Moshiri apparently has resumed talks with them, according to The Athletic. I believe they are the North American group that Alan Myers is referring to in terms of the company in Asia. I have not got a clue who they are. 777 haven't got the greatest record themselves or reputation themselves with running football clubs. I believe they've got a number of football clubs across Europe, and I don't think any of them are doing particularly well. I think they may even own a stake in Seville, or Sevilla, so to say, who are in a relegation battle in the Spanish First Division now, after obviously being a team that pretty much were sort of almost seen as one of the better of the rest teams for years and years and years in Spain. So, again, listen, I'm sure Everton could be, potentially being invested by anybody, and people would be able to find negatives for every single group. But one thing is for sure is 777 certainly don't make me excited for the future of this football club, and definitely don't fill me with a particular amount of optimism or hope or joy or sort of happy feeling that we're going to be much better now. It worries me. It worries me, and we are in a position now where, we're sort of in that dangerous territory of, well, surely anybody's better than Mashiri and Kenwright, but, ultimately we don't know that for sure, do we? We can't categorically say that anybody's better than Mashiri and Kenwright, although Mashiri and Kenwright are absolutely terrible, and that has been proven over the years, and last night's news was just another example of that. We also heard yesterday that the deal to bring Wilfried Gnonto to Everton Football Club is looking extremely unlikely now. Jack Talbot reported Everton are looking unlikely to sign Wilfried Gnonto after being informed the Italian is not for sale during talks this week. Everton were preparing another offer close to Leeds' valuation. It is not clear if Everton will come back in for Gnonto. The Mail did report yesterday that Everton was still keen on signing him. However, Leeds have rejected Everton's latest offer of £25 million, including bonuses and a sell-on. Phil Hay reported that Wilfried Gnonto has returned to first-team training for Leeds. That was on Tuesday, I believe. And then we have an update today from Leeds United manager Daniel Farke, who has been talking about the situation with Gnonto. He said, in general, you can't compare the situations. He's talking about Sinisterra as well. With Lewis, there was a legal, contractual situation. The situation is sorted. He's clear in his head. With Willie, there were no clauses. He didn't feel ready to play and refused more or less. We couldn't let this situation distract the group, and we were strict with our leadership. Farke then goes on to say Gnonto came to him to apologise and said he's made a mistake, which was enough to give him a second chance. He's 100% ready if I choose to pick him. When a player behaves like this, you have to make sure as a club that you're not blackmailed. You have to be strong. No one plays games with Leeds United. We are not reliant on the one player. I'm happy that we're on the same page and the club backed my decision. But a 19-year-old is sometimes there with mistakes. I wouldn't like to tell you what my mistakes were as 19. He then goes on to say, blah, 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 blah. You get a second chance, but there's no third chance. He has to work hard to earn the trust and love and support. The ball is in his court now. So, as you can see and hear there, the Gnonto situation is pretty much dead in the water. I would be hugely surprised, to say the least, if Wilfried Gnonto ends up leaving Leeds United Football Club, and if then he ends up coming to Everton Football Club at some point over the next few weeks or so, or week or so, should I say, sorry. Again, frustrating this one, not because I desperately wanted Wilfried Gnonto at Everton Football Club, because, again, I wasn't massively fussed. I think he's a decent player, and I think he ultimately would have improved Everton. But for me, the frustration comes from how much time we've spent on this deal. We've once again spent 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks trying to bring a player to the football club for ultimately it to have come to nothing. Now, don't get me wrong. For £25 million, for me, that should have been Everton's last offer. And maybe it was. Maybe Everton went to Leeds and said, listen, this is our last offer, £25 million. They said no, and we said, well, we're walking away. And that's when, the situation with him returning to training and stuff come about. The player obviously has apologised and is now not too bothered about leaving, clearly, because the manager himself says he's apologised and said he's made a mistake. Now, whether he means he's made a mistake in terms of the way he acted, or whether he's made a mistake in terms of him wanting to stay at Leeds, we don't know. But the reality is that this one is pretty much dead in the water now. And if it isn't, and by that what I mean, if it isn't, is if there's anybody at Everton Football Club who is still sat around that table thinking, oh, should we still test Leeds United resolve? Should we still throw another bid in? Should we still go? Don't waste your time. We've already wasted far too much time over the last 5-6 weeks or so on a player that A, was always unlikely to come to the football club, and B, even if he was to come to the football club, probably wouldn't have had a massive impact anyway. He would have made us better ultimately because, well, we're absolutely terrible at the moment. However, the reality of the situation is we can't afford to waste that time. We can't afford to waste that time. We've got to go out and we've got to sign a striker. Again, it's frustrating. Again, it's annoying, but I'm glad that the situation is over. And to be fair, I said 5 weeks ago that hopefully we can get a conclusion to this situation because it's boring me now. It's taken an extra 5 weeks, and that for me is frustration, and that for me is another example of bad practice and another example of poor management from those that run the football club. But we are where we are, and it's done now, and hopefully Everton can now spend the next week move on to signing a centre-forward, because that is exactly what we need. On the topic of centre-forward, Fabrizio Romano has just tweeted, Everton approached Udinese with an initial 25 to 26 million package for Portuguese striker Beto. He was already on Everton's list last January. Sources feel that's not enough yet to convince Udinese. Release clause into Beto's contract is €35 million. And that brings us nicely onto the Beto stuff, because he is a player we've been linked with massively over the last 24 hours or so. Damasio have stated Everton are still interested in Udinese striker Beto and are willing to try again to sign the striker. Alan Myers stated that Everton have started negotiations with Udinese for striker Beto. Any deal is unlikely to be done this week, and TalkSport reported that Everton are in talks with Udinese over the deal for Beto and have tabled 2 bids for Southampton's Che Adams, however yet to agree a deal. So the latest coming from 25 minutes ago from Fabrizio Romano, who is of course a considerably reliable source. He has stated that Everton have approached Udinese with a 25 to 26 million pound package. Sources feel that it is not yet enough to convince Udinese, and the release clause is €35 million. Yeah, again, you get the feeling that this isn't going to be a plain sailing, easy deal to be done. By all accounts, the Udinese owners are difficult to deal with. And by all accounts, the Udinese owners are not willing to allow Beto to move. We've heard reports coming out of Udinese from local newspapers there suggesting that their owners are not willing to sell him whatsoever. And actually are wanting to keep him at the football club. Local Udinese paper are running a story that unless a club offers Beto's 35 million asking price, he won't be sold. The Pozzos, of course, who are believing in charge there, they also say Gino Pozzo is considering blocking any negotiations for Beto due to an injury to Brenner, and there's not enough time to bring in a quality replacement. And 90-Minute Football reported that Everton have opened talks for him in the price tag in the excess of £30 million, but it looks unlikely a deal will get done. So the Pozzos are notoriously very, very difficult people to deal with, very difficult negotiators, and they seemingly have a stance that, well, A, unless the release clause is met, then he won't be leaving, and that release clause sits at €35 million. How are Everton getting €35 million? We don't know. The Blues says we're throwing in phantom bids that aren't actually real cash, basically wasting everybody's time. Well, if Everton's sort of way of working and way of thinking this summer is to offer £30 million for players, but actually only put £5 or £6 million down for the player, and then try and structure the rest of the deal over a number of years, then whilst that might work for other players, i.e. Che Adams, may have worked for Gnonto, I highly doubt it's going to work with the Pozzos. I would assume they would want a fair whack of that amount up front. Now, depending on what happens with Damari Gray over the next few days or so, who's obviously been linked with the move to Saudi, we may have that money to put up front. However, again, other reports suggesting that even if that buyout clause is reached, they still wouldn't be happy selling him. They're, wanting to see how he deals with injuries to other players, and they don't believe there's enough time to bring in a quality replacement. Why don't we just offer them 25 million and Neil Maupay and say, well, there you go, there's 25 million quid, and you don't need to go out and buy a quality replacement, because here is a quality replacement already ready for you. Yeah, again, I just get the feeling that this is one that would take too long to do. I do. Look, Beto ultimately is a good player and is somebody that I would like at Everton Football Club. But as I said, the Pozzos aren't, particularly easy to deal with. He's 25 years old. He's played one game so far this season. Obviously hasn't scored this season. If we have a little look at last season's stats, he played 33 games, got 10 goals and 1 assist in Serie A, obviously for Udinese. Yeah, again, we can't afford to be wasting any more time on players that ultimately aren't going to end up coming to Everton Football Club. And the reality is, for me, is if Everton have bid for Beto and it is being rejected, which, according to Fabrizio Romano, it looks like it will be, then a decision needs to be made for me. We haven't got time to then put a second bid in, and then a third bid in, and then a fourth bid in. Pay the release clause if you can. If you can't, walk away and go and look at someone else. Because, like I said, the Pozzos aren't going to, accept a deal that they don't believe is worth it. And they're clearly stating that if it's not his release clause, they aren't interested. So we'll wait and see how this one progresses. But again, I'm not particularly convinced on this one. Sky Sports are reporting that Southampton are wanting £18 million to consider selling Che Adams. Everton have already bid £12 million. Again, a deal that we probably could have got over the line 4 to 5 weeks ago if we'd have actually, sort of pursued it there. Southampton clearly are wanting more money now, I dare say, because he started well in the Championship and because they'll be looking at, obviously a promotion push. 18 million quid is for me too much for Che Adams, but ultimately we're at a point where we need to sign a striker within the next week, and if it's Che Adams, it's Che Adams. It is frustrating because I firmly believe Everton could have got Che Adams for 10 million quid 7 weeks ago before the season started, but we've waited, we've sat on our hands. He's obviously started the season with Southampton. He's done really well, and they'll be looking at it now thinking, well, if we sell him, we're going to need to replace him, and he's already had a good start to the season. So yeah, again, this one is another just example of how bad of a football club Everton ran. Last week, literally less than a week ago, Sunday, what was that, 4 or 5 days ago, there was reports that Everton were closing in on a deal for Che Adams, and it was looking likely that this deal would be done, over the next few days or so. We're now sitting on Thursday, and it seems a bid hasn't even been agreed. Other reports are suggesting a bid has been agreed, and it's more about the structure of the deal. But Southampton won't just sit around. They won't allow him to leave on deadline day if they can't replace him. And, Everton ultimately now, with every single transfer target, need to sit down and think, right, okay, can we afford to make this deal happen? There's no good negotiating for a player if you've got £4 million up front to pay and the club wants 10. There's no point sitting there for 3 weeks going, yeah, but we've got 4, because they'll just sit there and go, well, we want 10. We want 10, we want 10. And then you're just wasting time. So if we can't get this Che Adams deal done, move on to somebody else. Ultimately, again, it's just, yeah. It's worrying, and like I said, for me, it's just beyond frustrating at this point. Che Adams, at the moment, if you want an update on it, the same as where we were 3 days ago. At the moment, there's no advancements on that whatsoever, other than Everton are in negotiations with Southampton, and Everton have had a bid rejected. That's where we are. Jack Talbot was also reporting that Everton are in the process of considering other options to Wilfred Gnonto, such as PSV's Johan Bakayoko and Leeds United's Luis Sinisterra. Well, Sinisterra is unlikely to leave Leeds United, given that he has just been part of the same conversation regarding Gnonto in terms of being implemented back in their first team. Bakayoko played against Rangers, impressed against Rangers the other night. Whether or not that deal will be made happen. Again, these types of deals are going to be more difficult now because we are edging closer to the transfer window, and these players will need replacing. So, in terms of their football clubs, will need to replace them. So it's not just as easy as, well, you know, we want to sign him, so we're going to sign him, because clubs will go, well, no, because we've only got a week to replace him, and he starts for us every week, so that's not happening. Rick Elfrink have reported that PSG have contacted Everton over a deal for Jarrad Branthwaite. The defender is open to a return, and Everton seem to want 50 million or more. There is considerable doubt that PSG can or will pay for him. Yeah, the Gnonto stuff for me. The Branthwaite stuff for me is mad. It's absolutely mad, because Jarrad Branthwaite should be starting for Everton Football Club. It's as simple as that. And the fact that he isn't starting for Everton Football Club and Michael Keane is beyond frustrating. And if I was Jarrad Branthwaite, I'd be honest, I'd be knocking the door down for a move. I would. I'd be knocking the door down for a move. Why should he sit on the bench and waste a year of his career if he's not going to be given an opportunity? Now, I think the decision for Branthwaite will be made in the next 48 hours. Because I think if he starts versus Wolves and he does well, he will stay at the football club and he will continue. I think if he doesn't start and he's once again kept on the bench against Wolves, I think in the next week he'll push for a move. And rightly so, because he's just had a year playing in a European league, playing week in, week out, and playing in a European competition. Why should he sit on Everton's bench? Why? It just doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, again, for me, it would be frustrating, and it would ultimately be damning on Sean Dyche. But the reality is he can't sit on the bench. The Blues, he's fit. Of course he's fit. He's played in an international tournament with England. And even then, he was 2 weeks behind pre-season when he returned. The season is 2 weeks into the season. So he's fit. I don't know where this notion of that he isn't fit has come from. He's fit. And if you're talking about match fitness, he's only going to get match fit by playing games. So I don't get where it's come from. Yeah. And then finally, according to Akdu SPL, Khalid Al-Tunyan, who is the president of Al-Shabaab, has said, God willing, we will soon hire Damari Gray, a player from Everton and the Jamaican national team. That has come after various reports last week suggesting that Al-Shabaab have agreed a fee for Everton winger Damari Gray. Fabrizio Romano also said that they've reached an agreement with Everton to sign Damari Gray, and it is now completely up to the player as to whether or not he makes that move. I don't see why he wouldn't make that move, personally, because ultimately he very clearly has been frozen out by Sean Dyche. It's clear that he's not got a he's not got a future at this football club. Whether or not that is right or wrong, ultimately is a different question. But it's very clear that he's not got a future at Everton Football Club, and therefore, he will be looking to move. Whether he wants to move, on to Saudi, we don't know. We'll wait and see. But if he does move, then maybe that'll free up some funds to ultimately help us go out and bring the players in that we need to in the next week or so, because let's be honest, we desperately need it, don't we? We desperately need it. Anyway, we're going to leave it there. I feel like we've pretty much touched on everything. At the moment, nothing is happening and everything is happening at the same time, as is always with Everton Football Club. If you have enjoyed it, please do leave a like. It does only take a second. If you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe as well. We will be back tomorrow with the game preview to Everton's Premier League fixture against Wolves, so don't forget to look out for that one. As I said, please do hit that like button if you have enjoyed it. It does mean a huge amount to me, and if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. Big thank you all for watching, and we'll see you later.